Welcome back to the podcast. Over here walking the goats, and thought it'd be a great time to talk about a topic I've been thinking about for a good minute. So today I wanted to talk about Agave Shawii, subspecies Shawii, and its subspecies Goldmaniana. So the subspecies Shawii is the Southern California variety that's in the United States, and the Goldmaniana version is the one that is located in Mexico, in Baja California and Baja California Sur. So one thing I wanted to talk about today, and maybe the main reason for this little podcast, is I wanted to mention what I think the role of California farmers, nurseries, and agave collectors should be in terms of saving the critically endangered Agave Shawii and its subspecies. So today, there's very few Agave Shawii still in the wild, regardless of the two species, but I see a lot of it in collectors' hands, a lot of it in farmers' hands, especially the seed. And increasingly, I've been talking to people, and agave farmers in particular, and collectors, and telling them a notion that I think is probably true today, that there is more Agave Shawii in cultivation by farmers, nurseries, and collectors than there probably is in the wild today now. That's a very sad situation that has occurred because there is tons of development in Southern California and tons of development in Baja California, which is one of the fastest growing states of Mexico. So, regardless of it being in the U.S. or in Mexico, agave or Agave Shawii is very limited to the coast. Almost, a few hundred miles of coastline, extending only a few dozen miles inland. So its historical range has been very, very limited. And today in the U.S., its historical range, or its limited range, is actually in just a handful of spots that are national parks, Navy bases, people's greenhouses, but in the wild it's very, very small populations. And in Mexico there are there's a little bit more promise. I think there are several nature reserves conserving the land that Agave Shawii as two subspecies grew on, and conserving or propagating these Agave Shawii. So, there's probably a handful of reserves in Mexico that I know of doing this, and then in America you got, people like the Natural History Museum of San Diego and National Park Service, the California State Parks, all coming together to try to research and see where Agave Shawii has potential for conservation, So what I was reading a little bit today and discussing with my friend was just how, Agave Shawii has such a hard time propagating in California because, a lot of the research points to in between 10 to 20% of Agave Shawii Goldmaniana propagating in the wild. But in California, I've seen rates as low as 1%. I don't think anybody in the different research papers said that it was above 8 to 10%, and that is just seed viability. Seed viability is different than what is going to actually happen in the wild. That means, say an Agave Shawii has, 10,000 agave seeds, and bats only pollinate 10% of those seeds and make them viable, or pollinate the flowers and make the seeds viable, that means you're now left with, in California, say, max 8 to 10,000 seeds, or 800 to 1,000 seeds. And then in Mexico, you might have 2,000 of that original 10,000 seeds per agave, right? And what's happening a lot that the researchers point to is that because climate change has significantly impacted a lot of Southern California and Baja California, there's less water in plants and less plants available that are really, really green for rodents, birds, and general small wildlife like that is munching on these agaves. And the main one that they're worried about is like jackrabbits, squirrels, and that's something I've observed on my farm. That's why I put the fence up in the first place. The jackrabbits are far worse than any animal I've seen, more than deer, more than squirrels, more than pretty much anything. Like, they eat the plant and its roots and leave nothing. So out of these 8% in California viability seeds, and say 10 to 20% in Mexico, the majority of them are getting eaten now because the climate has shifted. So every year there's starting to be less and less Shawii in the wild because you've got a lot of development in both countries, and you have lower and lower climatic conditions and viability in these seeds, because a lot of the bat species that pollinate Agave Shawii Goldmaniana in Baja California, which have continued the proliferation of them out there on these reserves I'm telling you about, they don't really exist in California, like Southern California. And there's a few other species that aren't as effective at pollination. So, one thing I was reading a lot in the research is that the bats, are available at night to pollinate. And the anthers of agave really only open up at night. So the bees and several other pollinators are on the flowers in the day, but they aren't pollinating as effectively as the bats. And if the bats aren't there, then the viability of wild seed is just going down more and more every year. And less and less are popping up every year because of that. So, one thing I was thinking of is essentially, I got two little topics here. One is, I was reading this research paper, maybe like a month ago, where I was researching how certain scientists had forced open anthers on plants, which is the little sex organs that hold pollen in agave, which need to be accessed by the bat, right, for them to become viable and be planted. Well, if these aren't open in the day, you could have as much bees there as possible. They're not going to collect pollen, right? So what this researchers did was essentially dehydrate the anthers of a plant. I forgot the plant now. But they dehydrated it because they realized that when these anthers open up at night, they're actually going through a process of dehydration, which makes the cell walls, more slim, so less thick, which is what actually opens these anthers and allows for the pollen to be available, right? So my whole thing was, we need to figure out some way to dehydrate on demand these agave anthers and force them to be open for the pollinators that we have available, like bees and wasps and all types of these hummingbirds, right? Because they're coming to the agave. The problem is the door ain't open for them, like it is for bats at night, right? But if we could somehow force this, just rudimentary theory. I'm not a freaking scientist or researcher. I just like to experiment. I was thinking, well, if I needed to dehydrate it, I could turn up the heat in a very simple fashion by bringing like a heat lamp that's low grade to not burn the anther, but dehydrate it. And let's see if it opens up, And that's kind of what these researchers did on other plants. And I think it's valid to see if that research would apply to Agave Shawii, because then we would have that pollen available to the pollinators we have here in California. And, even in Mexico, the bat populations are going down very significantly. So this might be research that could affect Mexican Agave Shawii variety as well. So that was the first thing. But going back to the initial whole point of this podcast, what is California's farmers, agave farmers, nurseries, and collectors' role in conserving Agave Shawii, or what can it be? I believe that, we should start buying a lot of these seeds that are available from people online that have been now put in seed banks from different nurseries, different institutions, different, collectors have, large quantities of seed supply. And that's how I've started pretty much every Agave Shawii I have here. I just went online, found somebody that had an Agave Shawii, in their backyard, or had one close to flowering, and I bought seed off them, So if we can start connecting the people that have these plants, that are just watching these gigantic, beautiful blooms of Agave Shawii in their backyard or their greenhouse or on their farm, we can maybe start collecting this seed for good purposes and seeing what we could do with it, right? So me personally, I got a little goal. I'm trying to get 10,000 Agave Shawii seeds by the end of the 2025. I've got about 1,000 now. I've got about 40 Agave Shawiis and about 80 Agave Shawii Salmani, come on, Steve, Gold Maniana. And so I got a good amount of Agave Shawii. I actually have more hybrids. I probably have like 200 of Agave Shawii hybrids, like Blue Flame, and I've got Two Fairy, that's my Agave hybrid of Shawii. I got a lot of different hybrids, more than the actual plants that are like, the two that I'm mentioning from the wild. But my goal is essentially to collect as much seed as I can, start propagating them out, and then what I want to do is dedicate 15 to 20% of these agaves for restoration. And, at this point I haven't sold any agave, so, I want to grow them out to flower and grow them out from seed to, expand the genetics and make sure that the genetics of Shawii is expanding, not only being conserved. And because the stuff we conserve in a changing climate might not actually be the stuff that's going to make it in the wild anymore, sad as it is. So essentially I call upon all farmers, nurseries, collectors to start finding and sourcing seed in a righteous way. Don't go pay people to go steal the seed. And if you clearly see that plants are poached or, stolen, please don't buy them. I want you to start this from seed. I want you to do it correctly and righteous, as I mentioned. And we have to help these institutions in both countries propagate this agave to try to help conserve the agave, And I think if we had, there's probably a couple hundred people now growing agave commercially, you could say, or with an intention of doing a business behind it in California, then that means, say we got 300 farmers to each grow 1,000 Agave Shawii, which is something manageable, something, you could have in a small little greenhouse or in your backyard, or something manageable. Well, if we dedicate those 300 people to grow 1,000, that would be 300,000 Agave Shawii, which is more likely several times over what is in the wild today. If I had to estimate, I would probably estimate, there's less than 50,000 Agave Shawii in the wild left, and there could be as low as 20,000. Just those are estimates that I've seen. I mean, they can be wrong because they are estimates. There could be 10,000 on somebody's ranch that nobody knew about, but that's just a conservative estimate, you know. So if we could have 6 times that grown by our farmers, and in a decade have all of those plants flower and have seed available to exponentially do that again on the next generation, and then now create tons of hybrids and tons of ways of mixing Shawii. Like, one thing nobody's done before, which I think would be really cool, is to mix Agave Shawii with Agave or Agave Shawii Gold Maniana. So mixing the 2 wild varieties could create a wild variety hybrid that actually could be put back, repatriated, restored into nature, and be better than what is existing today, that maybe might not be the best candidate for a shifting climate in California or Baja California. So yeah, that's the main goal of this podcast today. I just wanted to let everyone know I think it's a valid effort if the 3 big players of California agave, the collectors, the nurseries, and the farmers, can get behind this effort to help, these governmental organizations and backyard collectors and NGOs that are trying to conserve this agave, because it's in really, really bad shape. The California State Park Service has it critically endangered. It hasn't been listed critically endangered federally, and that's something that maybe is strategic, because, as I mentioned, it's on a military base and several government lands, so it might be that they don't want an extra loophole that they have to jump through by classifying this as endangered. And it's listed internationally on several lists as being endangered. So, we don't want in a few decades to not have Agave Shawii available in our genetic pool as farmers, collectors, and nursery owners. This is an amazing agave. I have it growing here in the desert. People say its cold tolerance is 25. I've brought it down at 18 Fahrenheit with shade cloth. The hybrids I've brought even down further. The Gold Maniana without shade tarp has gone down to 19 Fahrenheit. So I'm pushing the limits on these guys. And I think, they're some of the most drought tolerant versions of agave that I've seen here in California, even comparable to some of the desert, agave species. Like, if I water my Agave Shawii the same as I do a Desserti or as I do a peril, then, that Agave Shawii is doing amazing. And it's, I think people kind of were hindered by that nickname, the coastal agave, because people didn't want to plant it in the desert and in the forest and, the microclimates of California. But I think it's something that is going to start happening more. And, Agave Shawii distillates, Agave Shawii food products, Agave Shawii's use for medicinal products and all types of biomedical research won't be able to happen if we don't have the plants. So if I, as an agave farmer, want to have one day, 100 acres of Agave Shawii, I'm going to need everybody to kind of get behind this so that it's available. And if a collector wants to have all these different hybrids genetics available to him to breed, he's only going to have that if he's trying to save and conserve the species. The nurseries, you want to sell 100,000 Agave Shawii and you have the clientele to do that, you need the plants. So, I don't care who grows Agave Shawii. We need more people growing it. And I think it's honestly our responsibility as being part of the California agave industry to try to do our part to save it. I hear a lot of talk of saving, different agaves and stuff, but I haven't seen an agave that is honestly in a worse case than Agave Shawii. I've seen several agaves that are endangered in Mexico, but what I'm telling you is being done in Mexico, where they're propagating it by the tens of thousands by certain nurseries and farms, and sometimes without even a business model, just to do it. here, I believe we can find business models that support the conservation of Agave Shawii, and that's why I believe people should start doing it. For instance, if I collect 10,000 Agave Shawii seeds, and I put 5 acres, 5,000 of them, and then I donate 20% or 2,000 of them to restoration, and another 3,000 I could sell as a nursery, 2 nurseries in year 1, when they're like, 2 to 5 gals. That allows profitability for an agave farm early on. That allows that agave farm to help restoration efforts and save genetics of agave that are native. So it's like we're extracting these resources from the wild. We want to make sure that the wild is sustained as well. And we're just not extracting, but we're putting back, right? So you could do the triple threat. And then at the end, if you want to distill them or whatever, or you want to make food products, or, you want to isolate certain chemical compounds from it, then go for it, But as I said, the more people that grow it, the more uses we're going to have to try to use this plant, And trust me, if it becomes federally endangered, it's going to be a plant that may be off limits to us in even commercial use. So we want to save it before it gets worse, And I don't want people to think, oh, he just wants to save it because he wants to use it for commercial use. No. But at the end of the day, you can't save stuff without money. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of people tell me all the time, it's not about the money, but sometimes it is, because if you're not a profitable business and you love growing and conserving an Agave Shawii and you go out of business, that conservation effort has ended. You know what I mean? So we need the farmers, the nurseries, and the collectors to actually make money to continue to want to do this. And definitely the prices behind Agave Shawii seeds are there, in my opinion, to promote the growing and use of this agave. So yeah, I just wanted to, like I said today, talk to you a little bit about Agave Shawii, about what I think our role as California agave farmers or collectors or nurseries. I'm all three, I guess, but what our role is to try to conserve this species and have it available for future generations to enjoy as much as we're enjoying it right now, And if you want to go read more about Agave Shawii, there's a great little paper or I guess like infographic that the National Park Service made. If you just Google National Park Service or NPS Agave Shawii, it's literally the first article that'll pop up, and it'll go through a bit of the history, the research, and different things going on with Agave Shawii today. But this podcast was just a quick way to bring this topic, I guess, into your head, because a lot of people don't even know this is going on. I see a lot of people on Instagram posting about Agave Shawii and how beautiful it is, and how they want to start farming it and stuff, and they have no clue it's a critically endangered species. So when you interact with it, you have to be doing it responsibly. But yeah, if you got any questions on Agave Shawii or some of the hybrids I might have, or where to find seed that is not poached seed or stolen or whatever, like hit me up. I know a couple good people that have this seed available. It's not the cheapest seed because, as I mentioned, we've made it such a rare agave that now people they'll sell seeds for 50 cents or $1 each, but I think it's still a valid pursuit. So yeah, have a great day, everyone, and go out there and plant yourself some Agave Shawii from seed. Catch y'all later.